Well, I'd like to start also by saying thank you to Ron and Heather and everyone at Alaska Quarterly Review and everyone at the museum as well. It's a real honor to participate in this event. And thank you, of course, to Carrie and Ashley as well. Before I start, I just want to say a little bit about my history with AQR. It was one of the first journals that I started paying attention to, and that would be about 20 years ago, give or take, which feels to me like a long time. So it was a thrill whenever I had a story published in the magazine, and then a thrill a year or so later when I got a phone call from an Alaska area code. And the first thing I thought of was Alaska Quarterly Review, because I know no one in Alaska. And sure enough, it was Ron letting me know that the story was going to be reprinted in the Best American anthology. And this is a lovely memory to me, and a strange memory, because I had, when the phone rang, been staring down at a bathtub filled with water, and I couldn't understand why it wouldn't drain. And I mention that now because for some reason I mentioned it to Ron on the phone, even though it had nothing to do with what was happening, of course. And what struck me was that he seemed genuinely interested. He seemed like if I wanted to, he would troubleshoot with me whatever was happening with the plumbing. But then pretty quickly, I think we both decided that we didn't care a whole lot about the bathtub. And then we talked more about the anthology. And I just couldn't not mention that for some reason. And tonight, what I'm going to read is a story that was published several years ago called Uncle, but it's one that I've been tinkering with again more recently. It's fairly short. So, Uncle. Some days she was the driver. The man would say he was tired. His eyes were sore. Could the girl take over for a while? Of course she could, but she liked to make him wait. She liked to hear him say please, then say it again, louder, and again, until finally he would reach across the seat and shake her by the knee, the girl pretending she was asleep, her head bent forward, drool stringing down to her jeans. Though she would never drool for real, this was only pretend. When eventually she said yes, she would like to drive, he'd help her over the armrest and into his lap. Careful, he'd say, careful now. And then he would take his hands off the wheel so she could steer. They drove across Missouri this way, across Kansas, Colorado, until they got to the mountains, and turned and headed north up to Nebraska. Then east, all the way into Iowa and back down, and now they were in Missouri again. It was September. Occasionally there were trees, solid-seeming walls of them along the roadside, but mostly all they passed were fields. When the girl wasn't driving, she liked to look through the binoculars. She liked trying to see what the people were doing in the houses at the far ends of the fields. When she saw animals, she would ask if they could stop the car, if they could pull over and maybe try to get one of the cows or a horse or, every once in a while, goats to come over so she could feed one through the fence. But then the man would ask what exactly she thought she would feed this animal, because horses and cows and goats wouldn't eat those little pretzels like the girl did all day. Now would they? And before the girl could say that this wasn't really a problem, surely she could find something outside for the animal to eat, some grass maybe, or a flower. The man would have pushed just a little bit harder on the gas, and the car would already be past the field with the animal in it, and the girl would be up on her knees in the passenger seat, twisting backward to see it through the binoculars. When the man said he was tired now, they stopped at a motel. It wasn't even dark. The girl knew the routine and ducked down below the level of the window while the man walked into the lobby. Back in the car, he drove around to the shaded side of the building, and she stayed close to the man's leg as they made their way up the stairs to a room on the second floor. They ate pretzels and potato chips and drank apple juice from the vending machine. There were 2 beds in the room, and the man let the girl choose which one she wanted. But then he said it wasn't fair because he couldn't see the TV from his bed. So he came over to hers, and they sat there side by side, leaning on the headboard, while the girl clicked through the channels. After the man fell asleep, the girl turned the TV down low and stood up and stretched. She cracked her knuckles one by one and watched as the man stayed sleeping. Then she went to the bathroom and turned on the water in the tub. She pulled up on the lever that closed the stopper, then wadded toilet paper and packed it down into the drain just to be sure. Outside, the sun was just beginning to set. The girl had remembered the binoculars, but she'd forgotten the hat. She liked to wear the man's hat sometimes when he was asleep, a disguise. He always wore it himself when he was awake, even in the car. Or else, he said, his head would get sunburned and the skin would peel and blow all over the car. The girl pretended now that she was being followed and crept down the stairs and across the crumbling parking lot. She paused in the shadow of a truck, an 18-wheeler, and turned the binoculars back toward the motel, room 202. No movement. The motel was situated next to the highway, and for a while the girl lay in the ditch and watched the cars as they passed. She turned the binoculars around so that the cars seemed small and far away. But really they were right there. She could feel her hair whipping back, lifting as they passed. Then after the sun went down, the girl crossed the parking lot back to the motel. She counted the rooms that were lit up and the rooms that were dark. She walked around inspecting license plates, then started collecting little pebbles and pieces of concrete and putting them in her pockets, imagining all the things a person might be able to accomplish if their pockets were big enough and they could find enough good, smooth rocks. And this is what she was doing when a woman touched her on the shoulder and asked the girl if she was lost. The girl shook her head. "Where are your parents?" When the girl didn't answer, the woman said, "Well, let's get you inside then." And she took the girl's hand and led her into the lobby, where it smelled like fried chicken and there was a TV on over in the corner. The woman told the girl to go have a seat on the couch over there, which the girl did. She watched the woman ring the bell on the counter and wait. The girl tried to listen while the woman from the parking lot whispered to the woman who came out from the curtain behind the counter. The woman from the parking lot was thin. She had hair that was brown like the girl's hair, but longer. She had a jacket made from the skin of a cow, and sticking out from the jacket's sleeves, the woman's hands seemed to the girl especially pink. The girl studied her own hands, which were not clean. She brought the binoculars to her eyes and looked at the women up close. But she still couldn't hear what they said. The woman who worked at the motel shrugged and pulled a phone from under the counter and set it where the brown-haired woman could reach. But the brown-haired woman turned around, approached the girl, and squatted down on the floor. "Those are nice," she said, pointing at the binoculars. The girl nodded. "Do you know what room your parents are in?" The girl sat still for a moment, waiting, thinking, then shook her head. "Is it down here?" the woman asked, "or did you go up the stairs?" The girl waited another moment, then leaned forward and whispered that her parents were dead. When the woman didn't say anything in response, the girl went on. "They're up there." She pointed, meaning not upstairs, but higher, in the sky. "If I'm not good," the girl said, "I'll never get there." The woman was quiet. Her throat moved like she was swallowing. The girl said, "Can I stay with you?" Then she lifted the binoculars and held them to her eyes backwards so that the brown-haired woman was small. Soon the woman was standing and walking back to the counter, to the phone, and the girl eased down from the couch and tiptoed toward the door. And then, when she got outside, she ran. She ran the length of the motel, rounded one corner, and then another, and then up the stairs until she was back at room 202, where the door was open just enough. The man was awake now. He was watching TV again. He had the remote in one hand and a can of Sunkist in the other. Juice, he called it. But he wasn't saying anything now. He didn't look at the girl. He wouldn't. She knew that. Their bags were stacked one on the other by the door. Likely they would leave soon, the girl thought, back to the highway. He would say he couldn't sleep if he couldn't trust her, so why stay? Probably he would tell her that if this is the way she planned to behave, then maybe it was time to ride in the trunk again for a while. How would she like that? Then probably the girl would cry and the man would close his eyes and sigh, and they would compromise. She would not have to ride in the trunk, just in the back seat, which would be fine with her, except that he'd probably also make her put the seatbelt on, and then, even if he did let her keep holding the binoculars, she wouldn't be able to get up on her knees and see anything. When the commercials ended, the girl saw that he was watching a baseball game, which meant that it would probably still be a while yet before they left. She passed between the bed and the television, ducking so she wouldn't block his view, and sat on the floor, close enough to the bathroom that she could feel the carpet wet through her jeans. The baseball game was somewhere west, where there was still daylight. Everyone was standing, the men on the field, the people in the seats, everyone. The girl tried to concentrate on the game. There was something here that people found fascinating. She stared at the screen for a while without even blinking. Then she gave up. She climbed up on the bed and leaned back on the pillows and pretended to sleep. And that is the end. Thank you again very much.